I Love Ferris Bueller in the Springtime. That's the heading to Susanna Gora's chapter on Ferris Bueller's Day Off in her book, You Couldn't Ignore Me If You Tried, an account of writer-director John Hughes' career over the decades. Ferris Bueller is a film about one final hurrah before the end of senior year. It's about the fears of adulthood and how people and friendships and innocence will inevitably change. And it's about reminding each other that life moves pretty fast. And the moments we have together, these moments now, are precious and not worth wasting for a second. Anyway, it's fall now, but I'm going to talk about Ferris Bueller anyway, because the last time I did, I only really had a chance to discuss its editing and the decisions that brought us to the version of the film we now have. But I also promised to discuss Ferris Bueller, and just as significantly, Cameron Fry, as characters. Because there's a depth to these guys that's really interesting when you break it down, and a part of what separates a generic teen drama comedy from a John Hughes film. I think there's this surface layer to Ferris Bueller's Day Off that can be difficult to look past. On some level, it's a movie about a bunch of teenagers doing nothing. Hughes himself has said of the movie that it's not the events here that are important, it's the characters going through those events. And we'll unpack that in a moment.
Where I have to get snooty.
Snooty?
But digging ever so slightly deeper, you could also say Ferris Bueller is a movie about sticking it to the man.
No, we like to be seated.
Standing up to adults, to authority figures, claiming youthful independence.
Can I speak to Mr. Rooney, please?
That's what a character like Ed Rooney exists for.
15 years from now, when he looks back on the ruin his life's become, he is going to remember Edward Rooney.
A buffoonish cartoon villain whose only real aim is to stop Ferris. But his whole shtick is really just distraction and amusement. He doesn't pose any real threat to Ferris. So, deeper still, and the actual source of tension, the most powerful force in creating obstacles and plot and conflict and depth in this movie doesn't come from Rooney. It comes from Cameron. And more to the point, from Cameron's father, whom we never even see or hear.
His home life is really twisted.
A father who doesn't love his son, whom Cameron fears and resents and can't defend himself against.
If I had to live in that house, I'd probably pray for disease too.
A father who is not incidental, whom John Hughes held a very specific image of in his head, and thus so too did actor Alan Ruck. The film's real narrative arc is Ferris creating a day to help Cameron, and for Cameron to find the independence and courage to stand up to his dad.
Cameron, this is my 9th sick day. I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing it for you.
And he wants to do it. Reluctantly, Cameron wants Ferris to break him out of his shell. Sure, he makes an argument for them not taking out his dad's 100-of-a-kind Ferrari.
We could call a limo!
But he doesn't put up a fight.
I could have stopped you. It is possible to stop Mr. Ferris Bueller, you know.
Ferris strongly encourages him to take a day off, but ultimately it's Cameron who makes his own choice to go.
$20 says he's sitting in his car debating about whether or not he should go out.
It's Cameron who kicks his father's car, and kicks it again.
Can't stand when I drop this goddamn car!
Who then kills it and doesn't allow Ferris to take the heat for it.
No. I'll take it.
Who ends up being the one person who actually has the power to make Ferris Bueller feel afraid and not in control. And it's not totally unfounded either. We see him asserting himself early on, just not as himself, as someone else.
And you insult me! What the hell is the matter with you anyway?
Cameron is a character who goes from making himself sick to avoid the world,
my old man pushes me around,
to a guy willing to stand up against the greatest authority figure in his life.
I never say anything!
That's a dynamic character, a character who changes. And we see the catalyst for that change here, in the museum, in his most introspective moment. Beautiful because without words, we plunge deep into the mind and emotions of a human being, using such a simple series of increasingly extreme close-ups to question and put into thought and visuals realizations about one's entire existence. This is why we call this movie, despite its name, a movie about Cameron. But Ferris Bueller, well, he's a different story. Ferris is what you would call a static character in storytelling, a character who doesn't change, and not only that, a character who is almost entirely without flaws. John Hughes said this time around he wanted to create somebody who could handle everyone and everything, and who's universally beloved.
Sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads, they all adore him.
Matthew Broderick says Bueller isn't just a person, he's an attitude. He's a way of life, a leader of man. He's cool, he's handsome, he's charismatic. He's both just a kid and also this sort of superhuman sage in the way he's idolized at school in this kind of mystic way, even by those who don't know him.
Goddamn, are you kidding? No, of course I'm not kidding. Do I sound like I'm kidding?
Who's he talking to? Ferris Bueller, do you know him?
In the way he's able to predict Cameron's own thoughts.
You're not dying, you just can't think of anything good to do.
How he can hack a computer to do almost anything.
I asked for a car, I got a computer. How's that for being born under a bad sign?
He's a fantasy. Hughes says Ferris was never meant to be real, that he got Broderick because he wanted somebody who could play Ferris, not somebody who would be Ferris. When you think about that, in terms of Cameron, who's very real, very naturalistic, who takes everything very seriously all the time, if you consider the fact that Ferris is somebody who has everything he wants in life, and his one goal still is to use his power to make his best friend's life better, that's altruism. His attention isn't ever inward, it's outward. He's chaotic good, and with Hughes' sophistication and Broderick's charm, I mean, that's just fascinating to watch. He shows us how to not take life too seriously. It's a fine line to walk, and it has its critics, and I get that, but one way or the other, they're right when they say, there is no Ferris without Broderick. And believe me, they tried. Ferris Bueller's Day Off was such a success that NBC turned it into a sitcom in 1990 with Charlie Schlatter in the lead role. It also featured a very, very young Jennifer Aniston as Bueller's sister Jeannie. And no, the show wasn't entirely flawed. Some of the characters were good. It was interesting to see Ferris operate within the confines of school, not just on his day off from it. The main issue with it, for me, compared to the movie, was really just how much it took the less credible aspects of the film and exacerbated them. That superhuman stuff, Ferris's ability to practically walk on water, his magic computer.
Not to worry, Cameron. I fixed it.
The overt degree to which he's worshipped by everybody other than Rooney and his sister.
I'm a senior, you are a nothing.
Got it.
Everything's just pushed a tad too far beyond belief and perhaps just stretched out a tad too much in show form, taking almost all the subtlety out of a very challenging character to get right.
Do you respect my opinion? Since first grade, when you got me off of ding-dongs and hooked on ho-hos.
Alan? How do you like the part of Cameron? Have you enjoyed playing it so far?
Very much so. I've enjoyed playing the part of Cameron very much.
The last thing I want to say is on the subject of friendship.
It's the best day of my life.
I talked a bit about Cameron, a bit about Ferris, but it's really the chemistry between them that ties everything together. Because they weren't just co-stars, weren't just colleagues, they knew each other well. They starred in a Broadway production of Biloxi Blues together the year before shooting the movie, something Broderick would go on to star in the film version of in 1988.
Oh no, I want to do it. I don't mean I want to do it. I think I should do it. I mean, eventually I have to do it, right?
They even showed a trailer on Ferris Bueller by choice, and that friendship is palpable on screen, particularly in a scene like this, just how in sync these actors are.
No, I didn't hit you. I lightly slapped you. You hit me.
Film productions don't typically give the time required to see relationships like that form before the cameras start rolling, and it has an intuitive effect on an audience.
What is that?
Ferris Bueller, you're my hero.
You're kidding? Oh.
Wow, that's pretty impressive, man.
You bitch. Oh, you son of a bitch.
As I said, I love Ferris Bueller in the Springtime. It's a movie about the ends of eras, that feeling of sunset, that middle place between sentimentality and uncertainty, that kind of warm afternoon that makes your mind go blank and your heart ache a little. A time of graduation, not just for these characters, but for Hughes himself. His swan song to the high school teen genre, his springtime, his end to that era as a filmmaker. A transition. A magic hour. Or two. As always, I'm Danny Boyd. Thanks for watching.
It's not right.